Officially we didn't exist. Officially we still don't. Have your area experience a severe wildfire, and if it is big enough, we will likely not officially visit. We will likely not kill everything we come across that was burned and still left alive. We won't have been there to relieve every creature that had been living in your area of their suffering. So there isn't any reason to believe this story is true. In fact, I don't blame you for not believing it. I wouldn't have if not for knowing it is true. There are so many secrets involved. So many opposing parties coming together to accomplish a mutual goal. It just seems hard to believe so many could keep such a secret for so long. But for the most part, they have. I'm not sure where to start, but I will just jump in. You see, the team existed before me, so I can only speak in complete truth for the time I was involved. Mount St Helens had just erupted. There was complete chaos on the west coast, and the chain of command for the circumstances was very blurred for those on the front lines. The closer you got to ground zero, the more confusion and chaos, and then you began to encounter a taste of those injured by the burns. Burns are an injury unlike other injuries. You can temporarily survive to suffer, while the chances of making it long-term are very slim, if at all. Of course, new technologies are being created all the time, and they may have come up with something that provides better odds for surviving bad burns, but back when Mount St Helens erupted, there wasn't much that could be done for burn victims. When you add in the size of the area affected, therefore the number of those injured by the heat of the gases or the fires, it becomes easier to understand why the team, of which I was a member, gets called in to do what we do. We were the kill team. They are the kill team. Because they are still out there, doing what needs to be done when it is necessary. Understand, we were not killers of human beings. It isn't to say that team members were all guilt-free of killing human beings, but it was certainly not our purpose. We were there for everything else. In the case of a huge tragic wildfire, there is not time and not the facilities to treat all that end up being burned. Anyone who has ever seen firsthand the results of a fast wildfire knows that it leaves many animals which are burned badly and that need to be put out of their suffering. That is what Kill Team does. Kill Team is not a federal agency. I don't believe they are funded by the government in any way. I do believe they work in tandem with government agencies in at least a very loosely termed, loosely contracted agreement of sorts. To put it shortly, Kill Team can be there and do their thing and be gone by the time the politicians come to an agreement on what to do. A lot of living creatures can suffer a lot of extra time while politicians argue about things so petty as money. Kill Team is a very large group that has always had the approach to their existence as the same as the Fight Club movie. The first rule of Kill Team is you don't talk about it. The second rule is you don't break the first rule. If I thought there was a chance this story could in some way hurt the current team, you wouldn't be hearing from me. The truth is that Kill Team shouldn't have to hide. Another truth is that human beings shouldn't have to wait for nature to end their lives when they are facing circumstances which cannot be overcome and that involve suffering or loss of one's mind. Sadly, neither of those instances are recognized by governments as cause for being euthanized. When you are on Kill Team, you must be 100% merciless, which ironically results in being the most merciful possible. The contrast takes such a toll on the team members that it is constantly seeing a turnover in membership. When we go into an area, it is a blanket of men who walk through the area killing anything still moving. If we are unlucky enough to come upon a human being, they are killed instantly unless they are unharmed from the fire or heat. That was never a circumstance the entire time I was an active member. There is no uniform for Kill Team. No special handshake. No secret anything to prove membership. It is a thankless job that offers no reward to either of the two kind of people that join Kill Team. Members are either those that like to kill and enjoy the opportunity to walk through an area and kill everything they come across, and there are those that have seen the results of a bad wide area burn. They are aware that there is little chance any sort of help will ever reach the upwards of thousands of lives left suffering from the burns, and know if they do not go out there and do what they do, that those thousands will suffer hours, days, maybe weeks, before finally succumbing to their injuries. Once you have seen the damage firsthand, it is hard to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. That is why if tomorrow there were a big fire, something like Mount St Helens again, that I would come out of retirement, and I know others would join me. Now it should be noted that the people who join Kill Team because they like to kill, are no less effective than those who join to be merciful. To be completely upfront, they are actually the better choices for this job. Walking through a bad burn and seeing what is left changes a person. I believe it makes the hard killers much less likely to be that way. I also believe it makes the merciful better at their job. At the end of the day, both types have seen enough that they have become the same for all practical matters. Both benefit from the other too. The killers show the merciful how to be a hardened killer, which in turn allows them to be more merciful in a much more effective and efficient manner. The killers view the mercifuls, and perhaps for the first time in their pathetic lives, see another human being as anything more than a means to an ends. Because when you have walked through a bad burn, you share a bond which perhaps could only be matched by those who saw heavy action in the military. Even then, it is unlikely they have seen the flesh of creatures burned off their bodies, melted like crayons in the hot summer sun. That was the sort of thing we saw on average when I was with the team actively. The few times we encountered any beings which were capable of understanding what we were there to do, it resulted in either them running toward us, or them running away. The conclusion was the same every time, except the time I am here to tell you about today. I think I mentioned I was on the team when Mount St Helens erupted. That being the biggest tragedy to ever hit the States, which involved burns, resulted in many retired members, and many first-time members, coming to aid the situation. The hotels and motels filled up with team members. Many may remember how hard it was to find lodging after the eruption. Well, that was at least partly to blame. What was a loosely based group became a team fast enough. Word spread by mouth, and 48 hours after the initial eruption, the kill team was on location, and at first light the next day we began to cover the immense amount of ground which needed to be walked to find those still surviving the burns. Creatures of all kinds in all sorts of conditions are encountered. The team killed with extreme prejudice. We walked through areas which hadn't even been burned by fire. Just the gases that blew through there at such hot temperatures were enough to severely injure the creatures living in those locations. So the team walked through killing everything. Then I discovered a cave. Inside it was a freaking Bigfoot. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The creature had its back to us, and it was obvious the creature was in severe pain. I had no choice but to kill the poor thing. After shooting it several times, I wanted to see what their faces looked like, so I grabbed the animal by its fur and pulled it over so I could see its face. I was shocked to discover there were 2 babies under the creature, which I determined must have been a female. The mother, to the 2 babies I was now seeing. They were unharmed. The first thing I did was to give them some water, which they drank right down. Then I decided to go find someone in authority to find out what they wanted to do with the babies. That was when Jimbo Horton came into the cave. As soon as he came in, he wanted to kill the babies, but I wouldn't let him. I didn't trust leaving him alone with the babies, so I took them with me when I left the cave. Horton tried to stop me, and I had no choice but to use force to get past him. In fact, I hit him pretty hard because he was one of the other kind. I knew if I hit him he would be coming after me. I wanted enough time to get these babies to safety before I had to deal with that waste of oxygen. So I used the gun butt to strike him, and then I rushed out of the cave and didn't stop moving until we were way lost in the forest. Understand, I am the kind of guy that always has a plan. On my good days, I have at least 2 plans. No, that isn't correct. On my good days I have 3 plans. The best one. Plan B. The shit has hit the fan. The last plan was probably something that involved running, possible violence, most likely some to a lot of lying, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to accomplish the goal. Currently we were on the second plan. Plan B. I suppose I had it on the back burner the whole time because as we began our walk I kept thinking about how Shasta was not that far from St Helens. How much they had in common. How it was very likely any animal that was living on St Helens could just as easily have been living at Shasta. I even wondered to myself if any, or how many, animals had made it from the location which was now hell, to the welcoming arms of Mount Shasta. I knew one thing. I knew about 2 critters which were gonna try to make it to Shasta. There was enough smoke still wafting through the area to provide cover once a person managed to put a football field's distance between locations. If Horton made it out of the cave in time to see which direction I had went, then I was in trouble if he decided to come after me because I had to lose my rifle in order to more easily be able to carry one of the little Harrys while keeping holding hands with the other one. I still had my 9mm Glock pistol, but if Horton came after me with a rifle, it was a severe disadvantage my direction. When I was hitting Horton, my mind was already deciding which direction I was headed when I came out of the cave. There were two choices: go back to where we had been dropped off and follow the road back to my vehicle, or go deeper into the forest and get lost in there. Eventually I would work my way back to the hotel where my vehicle was parked, and I could drive the baby Bigfoot to Shasta. I know what you're thinking. I could have made a fortune if I had taken them to a zoo. I'm not stupid. Of course I thought of that. In fact, it was a struggle for me. I like to believe I am a man of principles and that I live my life by a standard. Which I suppose I do, since in the end I didn't give in to temptation, but as I said, I was tempted. The thing I believe you don't understand, that you couldn't understand, is the deep and strong amount of emotions which are being experienced by those in such dire circumstances. We were surrounded by fire, heat and death. Their mother had been basically cooked slowly while in the process of saving her children's lives, and the kids had to endure it all. When you are experiencing these life and death matters in real time, the importance of money is very small. And in fact, when someone takes or makes an action which the conclusion is a matter of money, it is an offense which is multiplied by the amount of the stress you find yourself under, and you respond in like. Perhaps the only bigger offense would be one taken for the sheer pleasure of killing. In short, doing it because they know they can get away with it. That was what Horton was all about. He would have killed those babies just because he could, if I had not taken action. So we left the cave entrance, and instead of heading back to the drop-off spot, I took the two baby Bigfoot and headed deeper into the wilderness. We did have a couple things going for us. We were on the outskirts of the damage from St. Helens, and now moving away from ground zero. That meant the going should get easier as we went. The other thing we had going for us is that I have a natural inner compass which is seldom wrong. In many instances that wouldn't be a game changer, but when the sky is blocked out by ash and smoke, making it impossible to see the sun or the stars, such a quality is beyond priceless. You might think things got better for us as we moved away from St. Helens in direction of Mount Shasta, but they actually got worse before they got better. The ash began to fall so thick that things became beyond a matter of having an inner compass and straight to what it is like being caught in a whiteout blizzard. That is the sort of circumstance where the flakes falling from the sky seem to be coming from all directions and in such numbers that it is total confusion. The swirl of the wind spinning those big flakes around you in a circular manner would confuse even the best of trackers or scouts. It was the kind of situation where the smartest thing you can do is to find shelter and get out of the toxic ash falling so thickly. One of the baby Bigfoot led us to the cave where we ducked in and stayed long enough for the worst of the ash to fall. Then we went back out into it and kept moving. I had no idea if Horton had chose to hunt us. It was definitely in the back of my mind he might be out there. We were leaving tracks, but they would be covered again in a few hours. Plus I has little choice but to keep moving. I still had no idea what sort of damage the environment was going to endure once the worst of the situation was over, but I figured it wasn't going to be good. I also figured things were not going to get better in the near future, but I had to do something with these babies sooner than later. If it weren't for the eruption and I had found myself stuck with two baby Bigfoot, I would have dropped them off at the first wooded spot I came upon and trusted that they would have been able to fend for themselves. It wasn't normal times, however, so I wasn't dropping them off just anywhere. Besides, they were starting to grow on me. For one thing, they were amazingly well behaved. They obviously wanted to please me, and they were focused at the task, which made it so very much easier for me. If they had acted like human children, they probably would have got us caught or killed. The ground was now covered by 6 inches of ash. We had adopted an as the crow flies approach to getting to my vehicle. I could see the hotel from where we were located, but there was still one big obstacle aside the distance. I could see what I was pretty sure was the road, and it was packed with vehicles going south. At some point I was going to have to cross that road with my 2 friends. We were above the road looking down on it. There was a warm wind blowing from the direction that I thought was the volcano. Keep in mind the sky was overcast heavily with ash and smoke. So much so that when the sun went down, things went from light to dark with almost no warning. We might have been in trouble getting caught out in a landscape covered with 6 or more inches of ash and things going dark because there was no moonlight getting through. Things were so dark you could not see your hand outstretched in front of you. I could see in the distance where my hotel was located, but reaching a lit point while traveling through complete darkness results in a lot of bruised shins if you're going from the kitchen to the bedroom, but when going across miles it could easily result in stepping off a 1,000-foot drop. Especially in the area where we were located. The little Sasquatches were the difference. They could see what I could not. They took my hand and led me through the up and close while I steered toward the distant goal. Once we reached the road that was full of southbound drivers, it was no real trick to cross because the cars were coming to complete stops. We just waited until the cars all came to another complete stop and then we darted through them. Perhaps the drivers saw I had 2 baby Bigfoot and perhaps not. In any case, we made it past the 2 rows of cars all headed away from the volcano. I suppose that the people trying to escape going south were afraid of the same thing I feared, that the volcano wasn't through. It already seemed like the end of the world was in play, so any further big explosions might be enough to finish us off. The 2 baby Bigfoot continued to be rock solid. I didn't know if it was an instinct built into them or if they had just been raised so very well, but they gave me no reasons to wish they were not with me. Quite the opposite, in fact. It is almost as certain that if their superior ability to see in darkness was not with me, that I would not have survived the climb down to where the road was taking all those cars. Then to reach my hotel we had to climb back up the other side once we got past the road. If I had been doing anything besides going on a walk with the team, I would have had a pack with supplies in it, which would have included a flashlight and maybe even some flares. When on a walk you have to carry your own ammunition, and you learn quick that when you are out there in it, what you need more than anything else is more ammunition. It is freaking hard to walk away from suffering creatures, but once you are out of ammo, you're done. So most the experienced members carry nothing but ammunition, even though we are aware not carrying other supplies might cost us our lives. It is that hard to see the suffering and not be able to end it for them. A couple of the guys still carry some first aid. Frankly, it is a matter of 6 one way and half a dozen the other. You can carry first aid for yourself and other team members who might get injured, but it does nothing for a deer that has burns on 70% of its body and needs to be put down. Then there are the old stories about old-timers who had situations where the burned were so many and that they had so few bullets left that the burned were lining up so that when the rifle was fired the bullet could kill more than one. I'm getting off track. The point is that I normally would have been carrying some sort of flashlight, but because of the aforementioned circumstances I found myself without any sort of artificial light. Bert and Ernie, as I began to call them, did an excellent job keeping me from walking into things, or worse, walking off them. We created our own way of communicating while saying nothing, which I found to be quite smart. They would squeeze my hand when we were coming upon an obstacle which might require some special tactics to get by it. If we were coming to a place where we had to climb, they would squeeze my hand and then motion upwards with it. The opposite when coming down. Left and right were motions in those respective directions. I cannot say whether this is a tactic employed by all the Bigfoot parents and children, but it certainly lends logic to think it might be that way. It cuts down on needless chatter. Keeps all parties focused because the hand squeezes and motions all had specific meanings which both sides were learning to use to communicate back and forth. By the time we reached the hotel parking lot, I had learned enough hand gestures to be able to communicate to them that they had to wait there, where I was leaving them. That I would return shortly for them. We had used the hand squeezes and gestures to do the same thing before crossing areas which the babies were uncertain. They would have me wait and then go forward to check things out, and then they would return. Naturally, I was uneasy letting them scout out in front together, leaving me back behind. They could have kept going, and had they done that in the darkness, it might have been my last night in this world. They came back every time, however, and I had every intention on coming back for them. First I had to get to my SUV safely. I didn't know if Horton would be staking out my ride, or if he even knew what I drove. It turned out he either didn't care that much about the whole incident, or he was too busy heading south to worry about what I was doing. Regardless of anything else, the team only worked for as long as the regular first responders were absent. After that there was little reason to hang around. Especially if there was risk of the volcano exploding again. That only meant you had a chance of dying if you hung around. So I got my Honda SUV started up and I drove over to the on-ramp going south. I pulled the SUV over to the side of the on-ramp and got out. It took a few seconds for Bert and Ernie to come out, but they did. They were very excited yet weary of the vehicle. Curiosity and my encouragement won the day and they both got into the back seat. Again, they were amazingly well behaved about everything we did. I will forever be beyond impressed with the children or their raising of Bigfoot, all due to how well behaved the babies acted. It took a few hours to get to Shasta. We were out of gas by the time we rolled into the little town at the bottom of the mountain. We exited I-5 and found a gas station where I could fill up without somebody saying something about my passengers. I bought some sandwiches and fruit to go with the gasoline. Because we were now almost there, I figured if I had to take off and hurry to a spot to let them go, it wouldn't be that hard. People were too concerned about their own plight to be bothered about what I was doing. Understand, the whole world seemed surreal at the time. None of us had ever encountered a situation where the entire sky was blocked out by ash and smoke. Later it would be noted that the blocked out sky stretched out at least as far as eastern Missouri. So anyways, I left the quick stop with a full tank of gas and the little ones had full stomachs. About 45 minutes later I was pulling down a dirt road off a gravel road. I figured we were about as lost as I could get. Standing outside my SUV, the little ones did some hollering out across the landscape. They hollered for about 15 minutes and then took my hand and gave me the squeeze that meant to wait. Then they sat down and played back and forth with each other. Looking at them, I guess they must have been from the same birth. If not, then they were not true siblings, since they almost certainly were born at the same time or near the same time. There was a commotion in the trees which I checked out and saw nothing. I turned to Bert and Ernie to see what they might have seen and they were gone. It was over that quickly. I never even got to see one of them, but I am certain they were there. I found a print. I couldn't bring myself to leave until I was certain an adult was available to care for them. I will likely never know what becomes of the two, but I will always be amazed at how well behaved they were, especially after having endured such awful circumstance. After finding the big footprint, I headed back over to my SUV.